Hey all, thanks for joining. We'll be starting momentarily while we wait for people to join the call. All right, I think we'll get started now. Hello, everyone. My name is Christy Electris. I'm a board member of Climate Action Brookline, and we're pleased to welcome you today to the Select Board Candidates Environmental Forum, something we do every year, and we're really pleased to be able to offer it again this year via Zoom. First, while we're waiting for more people to sign on, I just wanted to give everyone a reminder or an invitation to join the Brookline Green Electricity Program. You can now sign up for 100% renewable electricity at brooklinegreen.com, and this is the town's own program, and it generates renewable electricity in the New England area. So there's also a phone number on there if you'd like. Climate Action Brookline is dedicated this spring a campaign to really double the number of the town's enrollment, and we really hope that everyone on this call will invite a few friends to join them and sign up for 100%. A few technical housekeeping matters. If you are watching this on Zoom, you can post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom panel. But if you're not, we still want to hear your questions. If you can go to brooklineinteractive.org/live, you can post your questions to the YouTube live post or the Facebook stream that you can access from there. And you can post those in the chat or the comment part of those pages, and we have someone that will be bringing them and collating them in. Every candidate will be given some time to respond to the questions across different environmental issues, and we know that some people have submitted questions in advance, so thank you to everyone who did that. This will be recorded, and so you can catch up on those questions if you are not able to sit through all of it, but we hope that you'll also add your questions here, and we'll do our best to get through all of them. This year we're offering live transcription, and if you wanted to use the closed captioning in Zoom, you simply go down to the live transcription box or the CC box at the bottom of your Zoom menu, click on it to expand it, and then choose Show Subtitle. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to John Harris, the co-chair of Climate Action Brookline, who will introduce our candidates.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, welcome to everybody to Climate Action Brookline's 2021 Select Board Candidates Environmental Forum. Again, my name is John Harris. I'm the co-chair of Climate Action Brookline and the moderator for tonight's event. First, I'd like to thank any elected officials who might be attended, maybe current Select Board members, town meeting members, etc., possibly members of advisory committee, and also any state representatives, etc., who might be attending. And then finally, I definitely would like to thank the 5 Select Board candidates. Climate Action Brookline is a community advocacy organization founded in the year 2000. We've had numerous successes since, such as the creation of the Select Board Climate Action Committee, the Solarize program where a lot of folks put solar panels on their roofs, and currently the BGE or Brookline Green Electricity Program, which we want to encourage everybody to join, to sign on to, and there are some questions about that, advanced questions. Everyone is welcome to join Climate Action Brookline, and there will be slides coming, I guess, at the end of the program that will give the website, or you can just Google Climate Action Brookline. Tonight, we have 5 very different candidates for 2 seats. This is a critical election, which will have great influence on Brookline's response to the climate crisis. The way we're going to organize this forum is that each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. And then questions will be asked in order of topic, mostly by percentage of greenhouse gas emissions emitted by that thing. Each candidate will get 1.5 minutes to respond to questions, and then closing remarks for 1.5 minutes each. And by the way, some of the questions get highly tech. You might not know all the details because they were asked by advocates. So you don't have to take all your 1.5 minutes, candidates, if you don't need that. So in terms of the order of questions I have here, it will be random, and I'm going to tell you the order in just 1 second. I've shaken this several times. I have no idea what the order is. And what we're going to do is start at this random order, and then with each new question, we will skip. You will follow the previous questionnaire, except with each question, we'll skip one person. So you'll see how it works. So it'll be different each time, but almost always following the same person. The first question first answer will be Donnell. Number 2 will be Nancy. Number 3 will be Zoe. Number 4, Miriam, and then finally Bernard. So keep that order in mind. So we will now begin the questions. First, the big picture questions. How do you envision involving the Brookline community in setting environmental goals and in strategic planning? And then related to that, how will you integrate environmental priorities with demands for racial and economic equity? What does the phrase environmental justice mean to you? Is it an issue in Brookline? And if so, how would you address it in Brookline? So again, first respondent, Donnell, please.
Thank you for having this forum. Peace be with all of you. So Donald O'Neill, Senior, town meeting member, Precinct 4, long life resident of the town. The questions. First, I would have more community engagement, more outreach to the residents of town on issues on climate, because not a lot of residents are familiar with all the new lingo that has come about on climate action. So getting residents who wouldn't normally pay attention to climate action more involved, it affects them. For example, the Brookline housing residents not being able to control their own temperature in their house, the AC units, things like that. So I don't want to say it's a racist issue. I feel more outreach and more knowledge about climate action and how it could help residents in the town benefit is needed. So I mean, my suggestion and what I would do on May 4th, please vote for Donald O'Neill, May 4th, would be to encourage more outreach and for folks to gain more knowledge on what exactly climate action is. Thank you.
Next respondent would be Nancy Eller, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Eller. Excuse me. As you know, I've been on the select board for 6 years. And before that, I was on advisory committee. And before that, I was on the school committee. And I've had an actually very long interest in climate. My parents were very progressive in many areas, including climate. And I can remember reading Rachel Carson's Silent Spring when I was a teenager. And that meant a lot in Galveston, Texas, where I grew up, because there was a lot of use of DDT because of the mosquitoes. And that DDT was killing birds, especially the brown pelican, which was on the brink of extinction, but luckily DDT was banned and now we have it back again. But my activism in Brookline, I would say, began in 2012 when I submitted a warrant article to ban polystyrene. And that was very successful. And since then, I have been very active in climate issues. And the first committee that I became co-chair of when I became a select board member was Climate Action Committee. The first action that we really took that had a significant effect in Brookline was the Brookline Green Electricity Program. And I'm sorry, I'm running out of time to answer the question. I thought this was a time for us to give our little spiel here. But at any rate, I'll just continue because Brookline Green Electricity is probably the biggest way we have so far been able to control greenhouse gas emissions. And I urge everyone to sign up for 100%.
Nancy, let me apologize. I'm going to give Danelle and Nancy another chance to get to the question. I was looking at my own outline here and it confused me. So again, other candidates, if you could give your introductory remarks, and then we'll let Danelle and Nancy one more run on the introductory remarks. So our next speaker would be Zoe, please, with introductory remarks.
And then we'll come back to the answering the question.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. My name's Zoe Lynn. I'm a Brookline resident. I rent over on Tappan Street by the Star Market, and I love it here. It's a great place. I'm running for one of two of the select board seats on the May 4th ballot. My professional training is cross-disciplinary in scope. It's in public administration, management, and the environmental sciences, particularly sustainability and how it connects to getting people to change behaviors and how you get institutions to change. My master's is from the University of Michigan with a quadruple major in areas of environmental policy and justice. A particular focus for me was on climate mitigation and community-based planning, engagement, and change management. I'm summarizing. I can dig in if anybody has questions on that later. Some of you may know my previous work. I see a lot of the attendees. I've met many of you. There's some new names on sustainability and climate strategy for the town of Brookline, hitting their zero emission target by 2050. I currently work as assistant director for business strategy and operations for a biotech in the Boston Metro. I often describe my skills as an area of expertise called wicked challenges. And I think many of you have heard me say that before. It's a term that describes very complex challenge. Complex challenges, ones that cross geopolitical boundaries, are interrelated, and tend to be very emotional, very painful, and like climate change, very overwhelming. They are very often controversial because how we move forward with them and how we address them isn't always clear or a single path forward. Climate change, poverty, our federal debt, the large plastic garbage patch in the ocean, COVID, terrorism, racism, these are examples of wicked challenges. Their scale, their institutionalized inertia means we cannot manage wicked challenges with normal leadership and policy tools. And we will talk about how we do manage them in a little bit.
Thank you very much. Our next candidate with introductory remarks, Miriam, please.
Thank you. Let me start by introducing myself a little bit. I am a town meeting member, a single parent of 2 kids in the Brookline public school system. And I have been a renter, a condo owner, and now I'm a single family home owner. And I want to tell you that I'm running for select board because we need real change in Brookline. We need a government that reflects our values with a clear lens on equity, good governance, and inclusivity. And I'm running to bring that kind of change. I want to help Brookline be more deliberate. We need a strategic plan, a clear vision for our future with outlined priorities and a budget aligned and reflective of our priorities. We need transparency and accountability built into our structures, and a strategic plan will help us do that. Importantly, a strategic plan means we can create policy at the intersection of issues. Climate change is an equity issue, as is your first question alludes to. Affordable housing centers around inclusivity, accountability for policing and public safety are at the core of good governance. All of these issues overlap and intersect, and we will do right to recognize it, capitalize it, and create a strategic plan with these overlays in mind. To that end, I believe a budget is a statement of our values and our priorities, and we must have a vision, budget, and a strategic plan that align to reflect our values as a community. My professional expertise is in building programs, working with scarce resources, building consensus in culturally diverse environments. And this, coupled with my experience, 20 years in the town as a town meeting member, as a parent, make me an ideal candidate for select board. I'm an expert at operations and strategic thinking, and at heart, I'm a pragmatic optimist. So I can't wait to talk to you today about how I view intersectional policy, good governance, inclusivity, and justice.
Thank you. And our next person with introductory remarks is Bernard Green, please.
Thank you. So I'm Bernard Green. I've lived in Brookline for about 18 years, and I have 15 years or 16 years of experience in town government, starting with the town meeting, then advisory committee, and in 2015, I was elected to the select board. That's important because the problems that Brookline faces in all areas are very complex problems that require some experience in having dealt with them, and well as knowing all the connections between a problem here and an issue that may come up later on. I'm former legal counsel to the Mass Clean Water Trust, which is an environmental agency that financed wastewater and drinking water projects in the Commonwealth. And I'd like to, I guess, say that my commitment to the environment sort of started when I lived for a few months in Jersey City, New Jersey, a wonderful town, but downwind from some horrible refineries that made the air absolutely terrible. Now, I looked at that as just a problem, of living in Jersey City at the time. By the time I got to college, I realized that pollution is a broader issue than just what's happening in your local hometown. I saw it as a global issue, and not just a global issue in terms of it's going on in China and India also, but a global issue in that pollution knows no boundaries. So even though I was thinking of it as a pollution problem, it really was the approach that I take to climate change now. It is a global problem, and we have to look at it globally. While important things are done at a local level, our thinking process has got to be global. And I'll answer that a little more in response to the question. You've heard me many times say, and I get in trouble with some people, saying, don't quote the scientist, use the scientific method. And I'll end with that because my time just ran out. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. Thanks, everybody. You're doing great with this time limitation. Sorry. So again, the second run through of introductory remarks is Danelle, please, because of my mistake. Danelle, please, if you'd like.
Nancy may go first. It's okay.
Okay. Nancy Heller, please.
You're muted, Nancy.
I always forget that. I'm protecting you from my dog. As co-chair of the Climate Action Committee, I have really been able to get down deep into the weeds on climate issues. And Bernard's correct, it is a global issue, but the way we best can address it in Brookline is to do our part to make Brookline a cleaner and more renewable, without fossil fuel free community. So the other thing beside green electricity that we've done on the Climate Action Committee, we've done a climate action plan to last updated in 2018, and we're thinking about another update now. We've done a fault vulnerability study, and that is very important in terms of environmental justice issues, and I could talk about that later. We have had a subcommittee on net zero schools, and we have pushed that issue in schools. So we now have, as well as town meeting has adopted a policy of carbon-free, fossil fuel-free schools. And the Driscoll School will be fossil-free, and I assume the Pierce School will also be fossil fuel-free. We've paid attention to it at the Florida Rough and Ridley School and also the high school, although we were not able to make them completely fossil fuel-free. We are planning to add solar roofs and other places in town as well. So we've also tackled the issue of infrastructure and, for instance, electric chargers, not only in town lots, but we're hoping that they'll be in some of the more private lots, and I've run out of time. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. By the way, we've had a number of advocates asking questions, so they get very technical later on. You just wait. So everybody will have a chance. Danelle, would you like to have one more clear run on your introductory remarks?
Thank you, John. And I'll be brief because I know we have a lot to get to in another forum after this. So my name is Donnell O'Neill. I've lived here my entire life. I've worked for the town, for the highway sanitation department for Brookline. My older brother actually is the only Black general foreman for the town of Brookline, I'm pretty sure, but he works for the water department. My sister, cerebral palsy, she's over at 22 High Street and is really involved with the food pantry. I am a father of two, 6-year-old who's on the spectrum. He's at Heath School in kindergarten, and a 16-year-old who's a sophomore at BHS. By day, I am a certified nurse assistant for the Spalding Rehab Hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm on the pulmonary unit, and I also work as a telemonitor sitter. I'm running because I have a unique lived experience here in town, and I'm pretty sure I would be the only select board member who has actually lived in this town, has worked in this town, has served in town meeting for 3 terms, and briefly on the advisory. So I'm gonna cut off short. My phone number is 857-243-3602. If anyone has any questions for me, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll start from here so we can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Danelle. So getting officially now, I guess, to the very first question that came in from a couple of folks, actually. Kind of 3 sentences, I think it is total. How do you envision involving the community? And by the way, the first speaker will be Nancy, and then we'll move with that, pretty much that same order that we talked about before. How do you envision involving the community in setting environmental goals and in strategic planning? How will you integrate environmental priorities with demands for racial and economic equity? And what does the phrase environmental justice mean to you? Is it an issue in Brookline? And if so, how would you address it in Brookline? So Nancy Heller, please, 1.5 minutes.
Am I starting yet?
Go ahead and start. You might get a couple extra seconds.
This community is quite involved in our environment and our efforts through CAB, through Mothers Out Front, through environmental activism on the from Climate Action Committee members. We can always use more. We welcome the input of anyone who wants to work on these issues. We've really tried to promote Brookline Green Electricity as a way of involving people in the battle to get renewable energy everywhere. In terms of environmental justice, I believe that every community faces this issue. We're not alone. The studies show that the effects of climate change are going to hit the vulnerable communities, seniors, low income, people in affordable housing, minorities. They're going to hit them harder than it will be for people who live in much more palatial, I should say, circumstances, or even have houses that are more insulated, the houses that are surrounded by trees and grass. A lot of our affordable housing is not. And the heat island effect of around those places and the temperature issues, cooling, etc., are going to hit those vulnerable communities much, much harder. And we know that from our vulnerability study.
Thank you, Nancy. Our next speaker is Zoe with 1.5 minutes, please.
Okay, so the topics are community inclusion, equity, and justice is the
Yes.
key. So I think, okay, let's get a couple things out of the way real quick. To actually have climate action, you have to have reductions in emissions, and that means just what's going out into the air that's causing climate warming needs to come down. And to make that happen, you have to hit 4 major areas in municipal operations and other places around the globe, as Bernard pointed out. In municipal operations, it's your buildings, your transportation, your energy, your biosphere, and your way you procure and dispose of goods. And to do that, you must involve the community. You cannot get net reductions without robust involvement of the community. In 2019, we did a pilot to see if this could work in Brookline. It did. We had 160 people show up at a summit that the select board hosted, I led, and it was over at the Coolidge Corner School. A lot of people on this call were there. And that was the beginning of how we could move forward in the future on dealing with climate mitigation in Brookline. It worked very well. It helped move things forward. For equity related issues, they're very much tied to environmental justice. Every time you're so as Nancy pointed out, it is correct, very much correct, that our vulnerable populations are going to get hit first, but we need to correct it to are getting hit already now. We had a lot of people die in Texas and in Ohio because of issues related to freezing and snowstorms, and we continue to see these extreme events, and the populations that get most hurt are those that are vulnerable. They tend to be minority communities, they tend to be seniors, they tend to be people that didn't have another place to go. And to deal with this, we have to move very quickly to get emissions down, but in parallel, we have to be dealing with adaptation to climate change.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Miriam, please, 1.5 minutes.
Okay, great. So actually, I thought I'd start by just defining climate justice. Climate justice means that climate change is more than just a science or environmental issue. It's a political and ethical issue. And because climate change often affects historically marginalized populations disproportionately, which I think we've all agreed on here. Nancy said it, Zoe said it. So this is an opportunity for us to think about the intersection of transformative justice and climate change. And any climate action must explicitly address structural power imbalances. So we have to create policies that involve all of the voices, share power, and we have to be really thoughtful that we're not reinforcing existing injustices. So this means robust community engagement, supporting new state climate and environmental justice laws that require the town to do more. So we're pushing in all directions. Intersectional policy, so housing intersecting with transportation, moving from boilers and stoves to electric, thinking about as we build affordable housing, how we make it more accessible, how we make it, how we couple it with transportation, finding overlaps between the housing production plan, new school construction, the climate action plan. This is where we think about a strategic plan, and inclusivity, active participation that has accessibility and empowerment, everything with a race equity lens, focus groups, meetings in the community, diversity group recruiting and diversity group meetings, and making sure people have all the opportunities they want to be involved, really actively looking to engage the community. And I think that's absolutely imperative. And I'm done.
Thank you. We now move to specific areas of.
Oh, you forgot me, John.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bernard. It's right here. You're right. I'm getting very confused here. So, Bernard, yes.
Hey, I'm well aware of how it can become confusing running a meeting like this.
Sorry.
Okay. So, as I recall the question, engagement of the community in setting goals for climate issues. I think that's very important, and we have to reach out to everyone, not just the advocates who we have here on this call, but we have to go beyond that and see if we can engage people who tend not to, think of the environment as a huge issue. for their lives, because there are a lot of things that we need to do at a relatively small local level in terms of, I mean, Zoe mentions the big plastic mess out in the ocean. I mean, a lot of things we can do about the plastic that we generate that can address that. But I'd also like to say that we need to also reach out to another part of our community, and that is the scientists and engineers who live here and who actually are working on the big solutions to the climate crisis that can actually solve the global problem. I see time is running, so let me just jump into the issue of environmental justice. I mean, it's a very useful way of showing how we're all really connected. Environmental degradation of inner city communities affects Brookline. It affects Brookline because people who live in those environments are more susceptible to health issues, and as we see the COVID crisis, more susceptible to COVID. And COVID knows no boundaries. COVID will spread from the inner city to Brookline as fast as the red line on a good day. So, you know, the connection between environmental justice in the inner city areas and Brookline is very clear, and we ought to recognize that and act on it. Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, let me remind everybody that at 7 o'clock tonight, the entire topic of the Bridge Forum is going to be, diversity issues, climate justice, every other kind of injustice, et cetera. So you'll have plenty of opportunity for that. Danelle, I see you're raising your hand.
Yeah, John. So I just wanted to, since we're speaking about community engagement and outreach, on Saturday, on the 17th, from 12 to 6 p.m., where there's actually going to be a community engagement gathering, social distance, of course, at Egmont Street at VHA. So seeing and I will get the flyers out to everyone so everyone knows who we're talking about. But so having folks like your group and Tommy Vitolos and come to events like this would help. I'll leave it at that, John.
Okay, let's be very clear now, just because of all the questions we still have coming, just to stick to the agenda, please. First area is transportation. Why is it first? Because 43% of the greenhouse gases in Massachusetts are generated by the transportation sector. And I do need to thank, let's see, the Transportation Working Team, the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and Viking Brookline. We have actually several transportation related questions. The first one relates strictly to walking in Brookline. And the question is, and the first respondent will be Nancy, by the way. In Brookline, as in Massachusetts and the United States, vehicles are prioritized over walking. What would you do to reverse and correct this? And what do you see as the town's responsibility with respect to construction projects that close off sidewalks and force people to walk in the road? How can this be prevented? And again, the first speaker, minute and a half, is Nancy, please, on walking.
Oh, I thought I was first last time, but that's okay, I don't mind.
It'll work, you'll see, you'll see.
Okay, so I agree with you. It is pretty awful that we have to take over sidewalks for construction projects. I don't like it. In fact, I would prefer that the construction projects not come up to the setback line, so we don't have to put the mechanism for constructing in the sidewalk. But when you don't have a choice, that's what you end up having to do. I would prefer to see us enforce a vigorous setback rule so that there is room on the property for the construction happenings to take place. Not always feasible, but certainly preferable. And the same goes with bicycles. Sometimes we take over lanes that bikes go on and in our roads. And I really prefer it not to happen. I think it's more dangerous, and we need to, again, force a setback so that we can have more room on the property for construction activities. As far as, and this also goes for the disabled, it's very difficult for people with disabilities to negotiate those construction sites. The other thing we could do is, if we have to have those construction site activities on the sidewalk is that we could direct people to go on different streets, certainly with bicycles. And we could also have different routes for cars. There's no reason we can't. Pedestrians as well. So if we publicize it in advance, we could make some progress, I think, in that, because, well,
Okay,
I ran out of time.
yeah, thank you, Nancy. The next speaker on the issue of walking as an environmental issue is Zoe Lynn, please. A minute and a half.
Okay, thank you. This is an important issue. It's important for our health. It's important for access and equity. A couple things. So, and Brookline has created a vision for sustainable transportation to help us hit those large scope of our emissions, that John mentioned up front. And that was Warrant Article 31 in fall of 19. The select board approved it, town meeting approved it, it went through advisory, and it's a vision that sets a path forward, a long-term target to get us down to prioritize 2 areas of transportation, to get it to a 75-25 split. People-powered transportation, so walkers, bikers, wheelchair users, cane users, and electric-powered transportation, micro transportation units, and electric-powered vehicles, and buses, and trucks, and et cetera. So that path, that vision has been created. It was created through a community engagement process, and then taken through a series of public meetings. And so the next step would be to execute that. To execute that, we need the select board to make sure that they're prioritizing things that staff should be doing and integrated planning in line with all the moving parts, and making sure that's reflected in budget and staffing demands and other things. This warrant, I want to just highlight real quick, was focused on getting our emissions down, but it integrated issues of equity, inclusion, and health, because these are all very much connected when you're talking about the way we use our landscapes.
Thank you, Zoe. The next on is Miriam on walking in particular. A minute and a half, please.
Thank you, John. So I think that Nancy and Zoe hit on something that's really important, which is, as soon as you said walking, in my head, I said, and wheelchair use. And this is personal for me. My mother comes to visit me. She requires a wheelchair. And to be frank, we do not go around anywhere in Brookline. The sidewalks are almost impassable for somebody who's in a wheelchair. And on top of that, I think this is an issue for seniors. These sidewalks are unsafe to trespass on. And I have a teenage son who spends his time out on the streets. So, I think this is a very important issue, and not to mention my own predilection for walking miles at a time. So this is an issue of both climate justice, disability justice, and support for our seniors and youth. We need to align our planning and zoning regulations to support a less auto-dependent development pattern. And I'm going to just keep coming back and saying it over and over again. This is why we need a strategic plan, so that we can actually plan out how to make safer sidewalks that have expanded width, quality, and accessibility, and how those match up with our development, our affordable housing, our construction. So I think a great example would be looking at the Boylston Street corridor, where we can study the increasing foot and bike access and what that looks like and how to replicate it. So I think this is a really important issue, and it is also a climate and disability justice issue, so very relevant.
Thank you. And the next on is Bernard on walking as an environmental issue. One and a half minutes, please.
Yeah, I love walking. Yeah, it's a very difficult issue because, as Marion said, the populations that are most impacted are seniors and people who have mobility issues. And we have to do something about that. It's not easy, but we do have some projects on the drawing board. For example, Washington Street Complete Streets project, which is a long-term project, but is going to be sort of a model for what we need to do across town. It's going to be very difficult because of the way that streets were developed in Brookline many years ago. But we can be creative and we can figure these things out. With respect to the construction issue, that's a very complex issue. Number one, we want economic development so that we can generate the funds. in order to do all the things we want to do for vulnerable individuals in our community, as well as parks, open spaces, et cetera. So we need that economic development money. At the same time, we need to figure out how we can facilitate these construction projects in a way that's not going to be dangerous, as everyone has stated. And I think that Nancy's proposal for regulations requiring a safe space next to a construction site is something to look at. I don't think that's an easy solution, though, and we got to really figure out how that works, if it can work, and if there are certain projects that it's easier to do that than others. But these are important issues because critical, very, very large segments of our population need safe spaces to walk on.
Thank you. And also on walking, Danelle O'Neill, just on walking, Danelle, please, a minute and a half.
Okay, I'll try to just stay on walking. So my sister, who lives out 22 High Street, who is in a wheelchair bound, has taken many spills in her wheelchair over here in the Gateway East. So I have had lived experience and bad experiences with over here, specifically during the Gateway East project and the Pearl Street sidewalks. The construction company would leave the sites in such a bad shape that residents couldn't even get out of our complex over here. It got so bad that I had to make a phone call to the DPW to ask for them to bring horses, the horses down, the barricades, to make a safe passageway for folks to get up and down Pearl Street. It was, basically, can you spare a sidewalk? Is really what it came down to. So I when it comes down to the complete streets, construction companies need to actually make sure it's safe. So when it down to the regulations and having that worked into their contract and their agreement for them to even operate in our town, that needs to be that needs to happen, and someone needs to enforce that to actually happen. There's only so much our transportation department can do, but it was very, very hard time over here when they were redoing the streets and sidewalks over here on Pearl Street. I mean, the residents we could not get out. It was completely unsafe. So I'm thankful for the DPW which provided the barricades for us here. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I'm going to combine questions about complete streets, and in the interest of time, Zoe will be the first speaker. Complete streets, Vision Zero, and bicycling, micromobility, that kind of thing. And by the way, we'll get to powered vehicles in just a minute after that. So the overall theme is complete streets and micromobility. How would you change town budgeting so it reflects the priorities set forth in the complete streets policy and Brookline's climate action plan as it relates to transportation and that famous warrant article, I think it's 31 from the November 2019 town meeting. How well do you think Brookline is doing in improving its bicycling and, by the way, scootering possibility, infrastructure? And that is, yeah, I think we'll do it with that. So again, complete streets, bicycling, scooting, etc. Human powered and very low powered electric wheels, maybe. So again, Zoe, 1.5 minutes. And Zoe, I'm sorry, I know it's a lot, but we have to go on.
Trying to solve the world's problems in 1.5 minutes. Let's
exactly.
do it. Okay. So warrant article 31 is the warrant that I led. And when we did that, we did it with integrative planning, good planning that you would want to see happening with your staff that are preparing the budget in line with what they're going to submit to the select board, and that goes through AC. So you asked up front at the question, how would I get it to align with the budget process? Your planning process needs to be strategic, and I'm not using strategic as a catchphrase. I'm talking about align with the operations of the government in a way that works with our current government and our team, our executive team, as well as our on the ground team. So I think that's part one. Part two, how would we move in that direction, John, is kind of what okay, so we're talking about a huge rollover of our infrastructure, and this takes time. This takes work like we're doing on the Beacon Street bridle path, which includes sometimes engineering studies, sometimes phased work in on how the streetscape would change with light traffic signals and other things. It goes through a budget process. So, but what we need to be doing that is in more place than one, and we want to be creating a network for different types of micromobility and micromobility users and walkers and wheelchair users and cane users and the whole group, scooter users. And to do that, you have to have a process to build out. The town does have a network that the Bicycle Advisory Committee mapped out, and we could be using that to start planning our budget and our infrastructure. But we're talking major infrastructure change, so it has to be prioritized each year to make this type of change happen, and it has to be prioritized in line with a lot of community engagement so that the changes you are putting into place are neighborhood solutions, neighborhood relevant, and community embraced, so they can actually be sustained after they pass town meeting.
Thank you. Miriam is next on complete streets and bicycling.
Thank you. So first I'll say, just I like to define things so not everybody's on the same page, even though this is a climate action forum. Complete streets is a transportation policy and design approach that requires streets to be planned, designed, and operated to enable safe, convenient, comfortable travel for all users of all ages, regardless of mode of transportation. So again, we can't make these changes in a vacuum. This is why we need a strategic plan, and this is not a catchphrase. This is actually something I think the town needs, that we haven't done it to this point, because we can't change the budget in a vacuum. We can't just move one thing. We have to look at the entire process. And I think in order to do that, we need to look at everything. And as I said in my introduction, a budget is a reflection of a town's priorities. So I think, in fact, we should make this a budget priority, but we have to really do it very thoughtfully, and we have to figure out where we can do it efficiently, where we have overlap, where we get the biggest bang for our buck. So we need to think about more safe, secure bike lanes. We need to think about our capital improvement plan and how that aligns with a complete street agenda. I'm going to stop there because I see the timer is running out.
Thank you. Next is Bernard on complete streets and bicycles, please.
Okay, so the budgeting part is very complex because everyone's looking for money from our budget. So let's just put that out there right now. But I think you start off with the idea of Vision Zero, which, as I understand it, is a vision that we have zero highway fatalities in the community. And that really is an important way to start, because it's possible, and it's a function of how successful we are with programs like Complete Streets, which give all modes of transportation an opportunity to get from one place to another in a safe manner. So that's one thing that is a huge budget issue. The cost of these projects is large. Many times it's funded through state or federal funding, but still our responsibility is pretty significant. I just want to also mention that you talk about scooters. As you may recall, when we had the scooters introduced here in Brookline, there was quite an uproar. So I think that just illustrates the complexity of many of these issues. In terms of bicycle improvements, we're doing fairly well. I mean, I don't bike as a commuter, but I think we've done a lot to increase the infrastructure for that. I'd also like to mention that we need to emphasize biking as recreation, as exercise, and I think there's some things that we should do here in Brookline to connect recreational bike paths and sort of extend it to faraway parts of Brookline, such as South Brookline.
Thank you. Next is Danelle on complete streets, bicycling, scooting.
Thank you for this question. So first I want to give a shout out to Chris Dempsey and Todd Corain in our transportation. They do a wonderful job on getting information out to residents. So I would ask everyone to attend the meetings that they're asking you to attend so we can all get our input out there, so they can take what we're saying and actually incorporated. For one who bicycle, I'm a bicycler. I work for Spalding Rehab Hospital in Cambridge, past Harvard Square on Cambridge Street. And I have two options to the way I would ride my bicycle to work. Would either be follow the bus route up Harvard Street, up and over across, or go the back way, past, Aspinwall to Kent Street, past Beacon Street, over to the Memorial Drive. And so an expansion and extending the bike lanes, I feel, or discussion on how do we do that would be nice. I'm gonna stop here and let's continue on with the forum. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, Nancy, on the issue of complete streets, bicycles, scooters. Thank you.
Well, in terms of complete streets, there's no question that we've made progress. It's never fast enough and it's never enough. The budget issues are obviously that it requires a huge amount of resources to make these changes, but we've done it methodically when we're renovating or redeveloping a particular area, for instance, River Road, or the Children's Hospital building at 1 and 2 Brookline Place. There's beautiful bike path on Pearl Street. I don't know if you've seen it. Likewise, we've done some other bike routes near me on Naples, which is a very quiet street. And I take my cues from my late husband, who was a biker. He biked every single day to hospitals and to his office. He reluctantly went on busy streets like Harvard or even Babcock or Beacon or Commonwealth. Instead, he would try to get onto side streets, which are really, really beautiful and very, very quiet traffic-wise. And he felt in some ways it was almost meditative. So I really support, and I know that there's a movement around the country, and I believe the bicycle community here has also developed alternative pathways. But that should be part of our program, because we don't want to force everyone into one street, and we want to have the safest routes possible for bicyclists because they are in the roadway. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nancy. You know what? I think next year maybe we'll have to have an entire forum just on transportation issues, because we're not done yet. And again, 42 to 43% of greenhouse gases. Public transportation. How can the town, first speaker will be Miriam, how can the town promote public transportation, especially the current bus routes, 51, 60, 65, 66. Buses are great. And more detail on that. Brookline does not apparently have covered bus stops. It's an equity issue because drivers are protected in their cars, but bus riders are out in the open. Why? The issue apparently is that conventional bus stop models have advertising, and Brookline does not want that. There is a proposal down on Route 9, modeled after iconic early stops at Village Square. It's a heat island effect issue. That's the hottest part of Brookline, apparently, because there's so much asphalt. So again, public transportation, and with a particular question about design, a particular design of bringing covered bus stops to Brookline. And again, Miriam, a minute and a half.
Thank you. And I just want to say that I used to bike to work. So the biking, and my son is going to be biking to the high school. And I think it's a good segue into public transportation, because my son is going to bike to the high school. We're in precinct 13, and in precinct 15 and 16, there's no really good public transportation option for those students to get to the high school. And so we need to actually think about how we work with Boston and how we get public transportation to all parts of Brookline and don't have these public transportation deserts. I absolutely think we should have more comfortable covered bus stops, having taken bus 66 and 49 many, many times, especially in New England with all of our weather. And I think we need to study the best use, which stops are the most used, which ones we need to prioritize. But I think public transportation, again, it really aligns with how we get people out of cars and how we get people to be more thoughtful with how they're getting around. And that if we have better sidewalks, we also have people who are willing to walk to the bus stops and to the T. And this is, again, a disability justice issue, because we also need to make sure I'm running out of time, public transportation is accessible to people who have disabilities.
Thank you. Next is Bernard on public transportation, buses.
Okay, so I think we need to spend a little more time as a town promoting public transportation, particularly the 66 bus. I mean, this is an incredible asset for the town of Brookline. It goes from Nubian Square to Harvard Square. It includes everything you'd ever want to go to if you add the Green Line into downtown Boston. That's one thing. It requires, in terms of the reliability of the 66 bus, the covered bus stops, it requires a lot of work with the MBTA, which, as we all know, is not very easy to do. I think in terms of giving access to getting access to South Brookline, that's a very important issue. It's not just public transportation, but I think about bike routes. And one huge problem we have is that Route 9 is a state highway, and Department of Transportation is not going to allow us to do maybe the things we want to do. But I think Nancy's ideas of alternative routes from South Brookline around Route 9 to North Brookline, the high school, et cetera, is one thing that makes a lot of sense. Covered bus stops, I'm not aware that Brookline prohibits ads. I know on the Green Line going into downtown Boston, there are ads on the bus stops and they're covered. But that's not the case with I'm sorry, that's the T stops. That's not the case with bus stops. I'm going to find out why we can't have bus stops with advertisements so that they can be covered as one way of paying for them. So.
Next is Danelle talking about public transportation, buses.
All right. So I am one of those folks who ride the 66 to Harvard Square to go to work, especially when it's raining outside and you can't ride that bicycle. That's the way I go. I would like to see more. It was wonderful that Chris Dempsey and reached out to everyone on that when the in regards to the Gateway East plan, expanding the bus lanes and having that bus lane in headed up Harvard Street and expanding it to Boston. So I feel that the time delay when you actually miss that bus in the morning and you have to wait 20 to 30 minutes for another bus, I find myself debating: do I walk to work up Harvard Street, take me an hour, or do I wait? So an expansion on the bus lanes would be ideal for everyone, I feel. And then when it comes to the houses, the shelter, in regards, I remember a while ago when the whole Gateway East project first came about, they even their new construction for the Village train stop, they wanted to remove our beautiful house tent shelter that we had there, and it hurt my heart because it felt like, when you pull up to Brookline Village and we have those little houses, it just felt like the village. It didn't, it felt like home. So I'm curious and I'm hoping that we can get some clarity on signage on shelters, because like you said earlier, John, that the asphalt over there in the village off Route 9 is the hottest here in town, and so to have some shelter there would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Yep.
And now Nancy Heller on buses, public transportation and buses.
The problem with public transportation in the greater Boston area is we have to rely on the MBTA. And having done some negotiations with the MBTA in recent years due to the high school, I can tell you that it is a very, very, very difficult problem. I think we have to approach it from the legislative standpoint to get more funding for the MBTA to expand public transportation to South Brookline. And that's an issue that I've talked about because I know that many residents in South Brookline would welcome that. And people say, well, let's build affordable housing in Coolidge Corner because there's so much public transportation. The problem is if we don't build housing in South Brookline and create an even greater need, we may not get the public transportation. But it's a chicken and egg problem, which comes first. In terms of the accessibility of the train stations, I'm really, really thrilled that the Brookline Hills T station, which we have been renovating, we actually agreed to renovate that station in exchange for being able to build over the tracks. And you'll see when that building at the corner of Cypress and Tappan is finished, how great it is. But that station is now undergoing renovation, and one of the biggest improvements will be the accessibility upgrades. And we should have those all. It was one of the worst before, and now it'll be one of the best.
Thank you. We actually have detailed questions about electric vehicles, but we're going to save that for questions to be sent to the candidates after the forum. So we just have to move out from transportation because we have other questions now. And so we're going to move to electricity.
Am I going to get a chance to respond?
Zoe, you haven't. Okay, my cards are confusing me. Zoe, so sure, go ahead. Sorry, I'm getting so confused here.
I know your pain.
Very bizarre here.
Okay, so my comments are this. If we're talking about a climate crisis, which is what this conversation really is about, and about environmental justice, we have got to stop talking as if and using the same thinking that we're using to pretend we're solving a different problem. We're talking as if we're trying to solve the same problem that we were solving 20 years ago, and it hasn't worked. This is the conversation I could have had 20 years ago when I started caring about these issues. We have to deal with transformational change on these issues, not poking at it here, poking at it there, signage here, signage there. We have to flip the system. This is a real serious issue, and this conversation doesn't feel like that to me right now. And we have a public transportation advisory committee for the town of Brookline. They meet like all of our committees. They work very hard and they fight tooth and nail to get things fixed and passed. And it would almost, and they report up the chain to the select board. They report to the transportation board and then up to the select board. That's how they are appointed and get their role in our town government. If we're going to deal with these change, we have to talk about transformational change, and it's not poking at it from the side. I think the other thing is when we talk about equity, the idea that offering public transportation is good, but have you ever followed someone in a wheelchair from their house to work through public transportation? They sit in the rain. It is the most unequitable form of access ever. That you would have someone sitting out there, they roll to the side, they sit in the hottest part of the pavement, they wait for a bus that shows up late because they're not prioritized in our street lanes, and then they go to work, and then they have to go into the dangerous part of the street because there's no lower part of the curve so they can roll up. I mean, this is not working for people, and we got to figure out ways to do this different. And if we keep talking with the same jargon, it's not going to get us there.
Thank you. So everybody has now weighed in on buses and transportation. Am I right? I hope. Right? Okay. Next topic, again, moving on, is electricity. It turns out electricity is responsible for 19% of Massachusetts greenhouse gases. And by the way, right now the question is about electricity generation. After this, we will talk about buildings and energy use in buildings. But electricity, so the questions are, what should be done to get to 100% green electricity in Brookline? Are you personally candidates on Brookline BGE, Brookline Green Electricity 100% renewable? And if not, why not? Okay. And we'll go with that. We'll go with that. So again, Brookline Green Electricity. And the first is to Bernard for 1.5 minutes, please.
First of all, I am on 100% green electricity. Secondly, the issue of generation of electricity. Fortunately, in Massachusetts, as I understand, we are close to, if not totally, off of coal, which is a huge problem across this country and across the world. So that when we talk about green electricity, we have to realize that we have a lot to do to get our electricity really green by eliminating fossil fuels from the generation site. It's better to have fossil fuels at a generator than to have it close to your house in terms of natural gas heating or other uses. But still, it's something that is a ways down the road. And one of the issues that's related to it is the fact that our grid is really not designed for the type of energy that comes from sustainable sources. The grid has to have a constant supply of electrons. And to do that, currently we use quickly turning on generators that aren't as easy to do when you're dealing with wind and solar power sources. I mean, water is one way that this could be done. Nuclear is another way. I'm not really in favor of nuclear power, but that's sort of the situation we're in right now, and we have to figure out how to get out of it.
Thank you. Next on Brookline Green Electricity, Danelle, please.
So yes, I'm on board 100% with the green electricity. More advocacy on the best strategies on achieving electricity would be ideal. So more communication, more advocacy, and knowledge about the issues and how to improve it would help. Zoe says something that hit me. There's committees on 74 committees or something. So we have a committee on everything in town, and the issue is what I'm hearing is people are doing the work. From ground all the way up to the select board, but there hasn't been any action from the select board. I guess more advocacy from the select board on how on creating more forums on how to discuss actually creating action on what needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on this question is Nancy Heller, please.
Okay. Well, electricity and green electricity, one of my favorite topics. We have to get to 100%. And one of the things we have been doing is last time we had a change in contract on our Brookline Green Electricity program. We went from a 25% default rate to a 30% default rate. It's not enough. What the energy brokers were telling us was that they were afraid that we wouldn't have any actual bidders if we went too high because people would be upset about it. So I think we need to continue to work with the population in Brookline to get people to opt up individually. It's a very difficult and slow process, but getting to 100% does really work. Now, our own electricity from the grid is only 22% at this point, and the legislature has bumped it up a few points each year, and supposedly by 2035 we're going to be much closer to 100%, although I don't see how that's going to happen unless they jump the percentage up. We been working actually communicating with some CAB members and some other out front members about how we can make the robust change to 100% among individuals. And I think that, it's people don't seem to understand, or they just think you know, they don't want to be bothered with their electrical bill. They just want to pay it and not think about it. And I think that's a huge education piece, and we need to engage in it.
Next on Brookline Green Electricity is Miriam, please.
Thanks. I'm actually going to jump off right from what Nancy was talking about, which is this, you know, how do we get more families to sign up for green electricity, of which I am 100% green electricity. This is an equity issue. It does cost more money to be to have green electricity. Not a lot, but if you are living paycheck to paycheck enough that it could decentivize you to signing up for the program. So I think we need to think about, you know, joining the Green Power, the Environmental Protection Agency's Green Power Partnership. We need to think about creating local incentives. I agree. It's also there's also an education component to it. But I think we need to think about our businesses on board, and when companies have much larger electric bills, how do we incentivize them as well? How does the community say, yes, I want to shop at a business that I know is getting 100% green electricity? So there are creative ways to think about how to push this forward, but I do think we have to be mindful that there's an equity issue here as well.
Thank you. So we're going to actually, Zoe, on Brookline Green Electricity, please.
Oh, you're going to skip me, John.
I keep getting myself confused here. Sorry.
Okay, so on green electricity, just a couple points real quick. One, advocacy is really good when you are in the community. That's how you make governments move. When you're leading the executive board of the government, we don't need advocacy, we need leadership. And leadership on the green electricity program comes in a couple forms. One, we got to make sure our structural deficit gets resolved so that we can deal with the equity issue of the program and make sure we have the staffing to deal with the equity issue of the program, and can fund maybe the gap or come up with the other creative solutions. We have to make sure that we can attract and retain staff inside town hall so that we can staff the programs that we then bring on. And then and there's some huge equity issues and pay and other things going on inside town hall that we need to make sure we deal with. And we need to prepare for a bid ahead of the bid. So that means right now we're in the process where we're delivering on the previous bid. We need to start preparing for it. So when we go out to bid, we can actually increase the default. If we don't do that preparation, then they are in the negotiating seat, we are not. And that's a big problem. These are things that we need to make sure we're doing at the executive level so then it filters down and we actually are able to deliver on our own goals.
Danelle, on, I believe, right, on whatever the topic is at hand. I
answered. I was just agreeing with what Zoe said. I was nodding my head in agreement.
Okay. All right. Okay. Has everyone spoken up about Brookline Green Electricity? Again, I'm getting so confused. So, okay, next topic. Yeah, next topic then is buildings. 32% of greenhouse gases in Massachusetts and as much as 40% of greenhouse gases in Brookline come from the natural gas and heating oil used to heat buildings in Brookline. Brookline has passed fossil fuel legislation twice recently. And so the question is about the current articles 25 and 26, which would pilot new enforcement strategies for fossil fuel free buildings in Massachusetts. So the first speaker on this issue is Danelle.
Well, first of all, I would vote. At the come town meeting, I'll be voting yes for those articles. Like I said, I know I sound like a broken record, but the more people know what the issues are and all affairs in town, the better involvement and participation and input you're gonna get from the community. And like I said, we have a long day ahead of us, and so I'm voting yes for those two articles moving forward, and I'll allow the other candidates to answer on this one. Thank you.
Okay, and next on fossil fuel free buildings is Nancy, please.
Thank you. It's a big thing to tackle. I was one of the co-petitioners, although a lesser one, if you will, on the fossil fuel free article that the Attorney General disallowed. I like the direction that Jesse Gray and Lisa Cunningham are going on the 25 and 26. I like the special permit rules. I'm going to support those articles. I'm also very interested in a pilot program that Eversource has in the northern neighbors, and hopefully National Grid will have it in here in this region. It's going to be a pilot program to deliver water, hot and cold water through the gas pipes. And it's basically creating a micro district of which, so we would, heat and cool buildings and hopefully municipal spaces and commercial spaces. The National Grid has submitted this as a pilot. We'll hear about it in probably September. But I think this may be the wave of the future. And it's happened in the West, in Colorado, around a lot of universities. They dug geothermal wells, which power this heat and water. They use the infrastructure that's currently in place, the gas piping, to deliver the water, the hot and cold water to homes. I'll stop there, but it's a very exciting concept.
Thank you very much. Next is Miriam for 1.5 minutes, please.
Great, thank you. This is a really great question. I also will be supporting both those warrant articles, and I supported the prior warrant articles as well. I believe both the carrot and the stick, and I think we really need to think creatively about how we think about compliance. So there are examples of really successful initiatives. I think Nancy's examples were great. In West Hollywood, there's a green building ordinance that requires new commercial developments to have like a minimum checklist. And then they take advantage of various additional incentives if they reach these points on their checklist that they're being green. And so it really is a give and take. I think the other place that we can look to learn from is Europe. They have been very creative in how they're creating green housing, and really much further along in their thinking and execution than we are. Denmark is a great place to look, where you can see, for me, having lived outside of the United States, I was using low flush toilets for a decade before I saw them in use in this country. So there is a lot to learn by looking at others around us. And I love the creative thinking about how we both enforce and incentivize.
Thank you. Next on the subject is Zoe, please.
Every time you call my name, I'm like, yay, I'm in the loop this time.
There you go.
Thank you. When I was sustainability staff for the town of Brookline, I was regularly asked why we weren't doing certain things, why certain things weren't prioritized, why we didn't have staff to achieve our climate mitigation targets, and other things that were up to the select board. And I used to jokingly say, well, when I'm on the select board, I'll be able to respond to you, but that you need to take upstream because I'm staff, and they set strategy, they set priorities, they set policy in which the direction in which we move. Warrant Article 21 was the strategy that I developed and delivered in line with the community, and the select board approved. And it shaped state law. It shaped the conversation around state law. And I'm very proud of what we did. It did not get approved by the Attorney General, but we made really good progress in reshaping and transforming the conversation in a really positive way. There were 3 select board members that co-petitioned on that article, and that was just really great outcome. But the reason we're seeing, in regards to these warrants that we're seeing, what we're seeing from the community is they're asking again and again for the municipal government to take action, coordinated action on climate change, not ad hoc solutions. And when we don't get the coordinated action on climate change, which means you have staffing, you have budget, you have a plan to move forward, then they put warrant articles through. And warrant Article 25 and 26 is in continuation of 21, and we're lucky we have a community that's working on this. But the next step is to get our government working on it from the executive level, and then moving that down so we actually can make progress.
Thank you. Let's see. Bernard, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think Zoe's comment that staffing is an issue is a legitimate comment, and it's a problem across town government, and we're trying to deal with that. It's not something that you can snap your fingers and solve, but it's something that you have to begin a process to solve. With respect to sustainability, we have a warrant article, 24, to establish formally the new position of Assistant Director for Sustainability Planning and a division of sustainability planning in the planning department. So that's one step. The planning department is understaffed in many other ways, but this is one step that is a good move. Warrant Article 25 and 26. I expect that I will vote for it when it comes before the Select Board. I abstained on Warrant Article 26 at the Zoning Bylaw Committee because I think that it wasn't prepared, it wasn't ready. It wasn't very carefully and clearly presented to us. And I expect that coming to other bodies and then ultimately to the Select Board will be much better presented. In terms of the substance, I have no problems with it. I think that there's some things that could be written better, but I expect that those two warrant articles will pass, and then the Attorney General will have her say.
All right. I think everyone is now weighed in on fossil fuel-free buildings. Am I correct on that? So I think so. Good. Phew. Okay. Will be our next focus topic discussion before, in the interest of time, before closing remarks, where you can cover anything that you haven't covered up till now. And this deals with food, nutrition, and health. Are you concerned about food insecurity? And the first speaker, by the way, will be Nancy. Are you concerned about food insecurity as the climate becomes more chaotic? Would you support a local agriculture initiative to reduce our reliance on produce from Mexico and California, for example? If Allendale Farm were put up for sale, would you support the town purchasing it and running it as a town farm? Would you support repurposing other land in Brookline for growing food? And again, the first speaker on food growing in Brookline is Nancy, please.
Thank you, John. That's a lot of questions. I do support locally grown food, and wherever I can, I purchase locally grown food. And food insecurity, yes, is a huge issue, and COVID has unmasked it in a way that we hadn't seen before, really. I think that we need to figure out if we could purchase Allendale Farm. Sure, I'd be thrilled to purchase Allendale Farm and grow it as a farm. It could be a fantastic way to teach our children how to farm. We could do so much with it. We could have various plots for different people. I mean, we could do there's so much in addition to, but in addition to having a large area dedicated municipally for growing of food. But will that happen? I don't know, but I am supporting locally grown, and I'm talking, when I say locally grown, I mean New England. A lot of the produce we get comes from Middle Massachusetts, and I was very pleased to work with Jim Solomon, who was the owner of the Fireplace Restaurant, the first green restaurant, truly green restaurant in Brookline, on helping Kate Stillman of Stillman Farms organize her cooperative for meat deliveries in the town. And she also has made a donation to the Brookline Food Pantry. So that was a real success in terms of local farming. I also have noticed to the Globe that we now have a farmer, a man of color, and his family who are farming in, I believe it's Vermont. And, I think this is the farming, the more it comes local, the better it is.
Thank you. Okay, on the issue of local agriculture in Brookline, Miriam, please.
Great, thank you. So first, I'm going to say local, local, local. I'm a big fan. I love that we get our milk delivered in a little white milk crate and glass bottles. We get our meat delivered from a local co-op. So I'm a big fan. And because, first of all, the quality of food is better, but also the industrial food industry is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases. And so local food does a lot to mitigate climate impact. So there's a Massachusetts Renews Alliance, which is a coalition of 80+ Massachusetts organizations. And they have a food justice frontline and a food justice with jobs bill that would subsidize local farmers and create jobs for at-risk youth and promote local food consumption. So I think we need to be looking at how we do that locally as well, how we support those larger initiatives, how we become a part of a coalition like that. I say yes to Allendale Farms. My kids both went to their camp and chased chickens and worked in their gardens. So I think it really does, it starts from the home and it moves into the community. So I think this is really important. I also think we need to think about using local money for the food pantry. We have food insecurity here in Brookline, and we have to address it more actively than we are now. So community gardens, essential, support local farmers, essential, and we need to think about how we use some of the federal funds to do that.
Thank you. On local agriculture in Brookline, Zoe, please.
I think these are really important issues. I think we have a lot of opportunity that we have not taken up on these issues. I think most people who know me know that I don't think we lack commitment or energy or intellect in Brookline, but we do seem to struggle sometimes with delivery of ideas. So I think these can be part of a larger conversation on where we're going to prioritize this energy, this commitment, this intellect that we have, and then actually get some outcomes. If this is it or other places are it, that's fine, but I don't think we need to just keep generating ideas. I think we need to move into action and make change.
Wow, thank you. Okay, local agriculture in Brookline, Bernard, please.
Okay, not an easy question. Local agriculture is great. There's a farm in Roxbury that's developing foodstuffs for local people. That's a great program. Allendale Farm, as well as other local farms are great sources of quality food, as well as fresh foods. I want to be a little careful, though, about the idea that we should only eat locally. You know, we had a president just a few months ago who demonized Mexico in many ways. I mean, but, you know, food wasn't high on the list of his demonizations, but, you know, there's an implicit view that, you know, we can cut ourselves off from the rest of the world, including Mexico, with respect to food and other areas. I think that in our messaging, we have to be just very, very careful that we're not sending a message to the third world, as we used to call it, that we are different from you. We don't rely on you, that your concerns are not our concerns. But, you know, beyond, other than that, I think that to the extent that we can source food locally, either in, you know, at local farms or warehouse type growing entities, I think is probably, you know, a wave of the future, not to replace the worldwide division of labor in terms of food production, but an important way to get quality fresh foods locally year round.
All right, thank you very much. Local agriculture in Brookline, Danelle, please.
All right, well, thank you for this question. So I'll try to be brief once again. So in 2012, I survived hunger, we'll say, by eating state tomatoes that I grew in my backyard. And the idea of having a green thumb and knowing that you can eat from what you grow, you know, it's deeper than just you reap what you sow. And the idea of what Miriam said, I like what Miriam said in regards to jobs, working with farms and employing the youth so they can learn how to farm and feed themselves is a great idea. And if Allendale ever decided to sell, we need to hop on that ASAP as soon as possible, if that ever came up. It's a privilege to have Allendale Farm here in town. And, you know, I wasn't ever, you know, I wasn't able to attend the camps, you know, there at Allendale Farm and all that, but I would like to see my youngest son attend a Allendale Farm camp or something similar to that. So more exposure to what farming is about and agriculture and how it benefits the community from within the community is needed. I'll stop there, John.
Thank you very much. Okay, we move to final remarks, closing remarks. And this is, you can cover any climate change or environmental issue that perhaps we have not yet gotten. And our first speaker on this will be Miriam, please.
Great, thank you, John. So I really want to share actually an experience that I had that hammered home to me the intersection of climate change with race equity, housing, and transportation. And I responded to Hurricane Katrina. I was on the ground in the 9th Ward after the flooding, counting bodies. And there was never a more profound moment when you could see race equity, communities forced to live in a floodplain who died because there was no busing to house them out of a level 5 hurricane and flooding. And so, you know, that was a real turning point for me in how I saw all of these issues overlap with each other. And so I'm a solutions person. I like problem solving. And so I like to look around and say, okay, what can we do? How do we do it better? And a good example that comes to mind is the Gateway East project, which is a multimodal transportation infrastructure project. It's designed to improve pedestrian, cyclist, public transportation, and livability in a section of Brookline Village that recognizes there's 40,000 motor vehicle cars that traverse through that area all the time, daily. And it's funded through the Federal Transportation Improvement Project. Funds are allocated from the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. This is really how we build consensus. We have intersecting ideas and policies, and we work together to bring those forward for the betterment of everybody. So because I have 20 seconds left, I think you should vote for me because I have these skills to help Brookline develop and execute a strategic plan with a lens on equity, co-governance, and inclusivity that looks at all the overlaps and all of these intersectional issues. And I'm passionate about Brookline. I'm eager to work diligently for this community. And check out my website, miriamforbrookline.com.
Thank you. Closing remarks, Zoe, please.
So thanks, John. Thanks for hosting this. I think I used to say this all the time. I still say it all the time. I'll say it again for those that know me, just like a broken record. You know, it's really easy to talk about these issues. And in Brookline, when I arrived here, I remember thinking, wow, this is so special. We have extraordinary commitment, we have extraordinary energy, and we have unbelievable talent that actually can solve some of the toughest problems in Brookline, in our region, and that can be a model for our state and national policies. And that is a really special place. We're not leveraging that, our capabilities. And Raul said something to me the other day, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. We were talking about equity issues, and I said something, and he said, you know, Zoe, we have been working for so long on these issues. We've been working and working. And I think that's the same for people that have been working on climate and environmental justice. We have been working for so long on these issues. And this conversation, we are finally in a space where we are getting professionals like myself that are leading governments, and we are making progress because it's taken us a long time to get to the space where we have the skills to really move this issue forward. In 2019, when I worked for the town, we started doing that. We put strategy together that worked within our town meeting government. It was inclusive, very inclusive for our first pilot, and it started shaping our energy, our commitment, our action, and it's our energy, our commitment, our intellect, and it started moving that into strategy. And then we move that into actual deliverables. And that is what we need to do now. We need to start moving from talk to actually delivering. Anybody can talk about the issues we talked about tonight. We've been talking about these issues for 20 years. These are talking points. We need to deliver on these. And with Raul, it's the same on these equity issues. People have been fighting for so long. I think it's time that our talk moves into what we know from the science and how we know how to move and make change happen.
Thank you. Closing remarks, Bernard, please.
One of the things that I learned as a select board member and previously on the advisory committee, and before that many years ago on a school board in Ohio, is that we have a lot of great ideas. It's very difficult to actually implement them given the structures that we work within. Those structures include, for example, here in Massachusetts, the obvious one being Proposition 2.5. It's not easy to just solve problems, even though you have great ideas. But as a select board, we've been working hard to address many of the climate issues over many years. Yes, we haven't solved the problem of climate crisis, but we've done a lot in terms of getting rid of various types of plastics, in terms of our initiatives, in terms of fossil fuel free buildings, and many other things, from transportation to education. So I think we need to give ourselves credit, but acknowledge the fact that this is not an easy task, and as Zoe says, it's a wicked task that is complex as you get deeper into it. And that's why one of the things that I've tried to emphasize in terms of the global climate crisis is that we got to take advantage of the fact that right here in Brookline, we have among the smartest people in the world in terms of scientists and engineers who we can tap to encourage them in addressing the climate crisis on a global scale, but also tap in terms of helping our community understand the complexities as well as the things that we can do in our small part of the world to address climate change. One of the problems I think we have here in Brookline is that among the advocates, there's a lot of knowledge about the problem of climate change, but among the masses of people here in Brookline, there's not a lot, and we need to change that, and we do it. I think we can do that through educational efforts and tapping into the incredible resources we have right here in the Boston area. So.
Thank you. Closing remarks, Donnell O'Neill, please.
Thank you. First of all, May 4th, please vote, Donnell O'Neill. My phone number is 857-243-3602. Please reach out if you have any questions for me, anything you want to say, any advice, anything. I don't understand why it's so hard to actually implement things. We do a lot of talking, a lot of consulting, and everyone said we have the people here to actually get the job done. So we're doing too much talking. I feel we just need to just do it. I'm gonna use my time to give a shout out to the Egmont Cookout on Saturday, to give folks who do not, to give everyone an opportunity to speak to these folks that are affected by the decisions that the leaders make in this town, to ask the questions on how they feel about all affairs that are going on in town with them, and the climate, any and everything. So I from 12 to 6 in Egmont, there would be a community outreach, engagement, social distance event. Food, everything will be there. So please attend. Please vote for me, May 4th. I really appreciate it. We don't have that many leaders that are actually boots on the ground. They might talk like they are, but they're really not. Thank you. I give you my number. Please reach out if you need to. My DonnellO'Neill.com is my website. If you'd like to add in comments. Appreciate you. Thank you for having this event. Really appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Nancy Heller, closing remarks, and you get the final word.
Okay, the last word. So there's so much to talk about and do actually in Brookline about climate and climate change. And one of the things that I have been doing is worrying about and trying to fix the leaks, natural gas leaks that we have in this town. Methane is what leaks out of those really old 120-year-old pipes, or however old they are. And that's very dangerous, not only for the environment, but for our health. So since day one almost, I've been tackling those gas leaks by insisting, when National Grid or any other company came before us and they were planning to dig up our streets, I've been insisting that they fix whatever leak is surrounding that area. It could even be a block or two away, but I've wanted to impose a condition on National Grid and the other companies. They have to get the cooperation of National Grid to fix the leak. And that strategy actually has worked. We have actually reduced the number of leaks in the town. When I first came on the select board, we had 350. Now we're about 250 to 60. I've been working with a group called Gas Leaks Allies, which is a regional group of climate activists, municipalities, and their climate staff, as well as people from others out front. And that's where the idea came from for these mini micro unit delivery of electricity instead of gas. And that was from an organization called HEAT. So I've run out of time, but I am very, very committed, as you can tell, to doing things about our climate. And I hope that you will support me. My website is hellerforselectboard.com. Please vote on May 4th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, would like to tell everybody that there have been many unanswered questions. Those will be sent to the candidates and their answers will be posted on the CAB website. Also, as soon as the recording is made available, it will be posted on the big website, on the big YouTube channel website, and also CAB will have a link to that. I would very much like to thank the candidates and good luck to all the candidates. I'd also like to thank Ann Theis and Corbin of BIG for the tech manipulation of all this event, and also Christy Electris, Rebecca Salguero, and Pat Maher of CAB. I would like to remind everyone, early voting begins on April 24 and election day is May 4. Be sure you get out and vote. Climate Action Brookline meets on the second Monday of each month at 5 p.m. via Zoom for the town meeting. And you can get info on that by going to climateactionbrookline.org, I believe it is. So possibly .com. So on that note, would like to thank everyone for partaking in this event. And at 7 o'clock tonight, move your channel over to the bridge event that is also being run through BIG. So thanks to everybody. Good luck to the candidates and good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.